I learned pretty early on in my life after having worked in corporate America that you have to chase your calling, not your passion. I couldn't tell you exactly why we're ultimately being successful, but I do know our big differentiating factor is we have a personality. You're going to work a lot, you're going to make a really good living, but you have to find what we call work-life harmony. Work-life balance doesn't exist anymore. You just have to go for it and you have to commit 100%. You can't be successful, especially in recruiting or any sales environment, by doing it half-assed. It can't be a side gig. I will always measure my success based upon the success of my employees. If I could take these young individuals and give them something that they probably think that they never could have had, that's how I'm going to measure my success.
Welcome back to Mic'd Up. I'm your host, Mike DiCioccio, alongside our co-host, Dave Ragosa. Dave, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing fantastic, Mikey.
All right, let's bring on our guest today. And this guy comes to us right from Dave, highly suggested to come on the show. And he comes to us with over a decade of experience in both corporate and the agency settings. And our guest has worked with industry giants like Samsung, and they even launched their own successful recruiting agency. They are a true expert in the field, specializing in private equity groups, human capital management, advisory roles, executive recruiting, mergers, and acquisitions as well. Welcome to the show, Chief Executive and Recruiting Officer of Leap Brands, the founder of the $1 Million Recruiter, and a legend in the making, Chris Wunder.
Mike, David, thank you so much for having me today. I'm not gonna lie, that was probably the best intro. I got chills, to be honest. I'm really excited about that. I'm like, when's this thing gonna end? I'm happy it did.
All right, high expectations out of the gate, Dave. Let's not drop the ball on this one.
That's right.
Hey, Chris, you probably now know that I was peeping your LinkedIn a little bit there to pull some of that information in. So love what you're doing, man. You've been in the recruiting space for over a decade, so I want to start with that. I'd love you to share what initially drew you into that space. And obviously something about it's been magnetic because you decided to stay there. You didn't pivot or anything like that. You've been in the recruiting space for over a decade. So what do you love about the industry? What's been magnetic? And what ultimately led you into launching your own agency?
Yeah, so I try not to be too overly long-winded here, but at the end of the day, I didn't grow up thinking I was going to be a recruiter, right? It's probably the last thing that was on my list. And honestly, I was pushed into it, and I would probably have to credit my wife a little bit as to why I ended up in a sales, right? It's a sales-related role at the end of the day. Maybe we'll talk about my background here in a minute to kind of give that full story of how I landed here. But why I stayed here is the relationships, right? I learned pretty early on in my life after having worked in corporate America that you have to chase your calling, not your passion, right? Otherwise, I'd be a broke CrossFit athlete or a gym owner at the end of the day. And when I fell into recruiting, it was very seamless because it was all about building and retaining relationships. And how do you expand on that? How do you add value? It's something that I never knew early on, especially during my collegiate career after getting 7 years to get my bachelor's degree and graduating with 180 credits and, changing my major, I think 7 or 8 times, everything from pre-med to pre-law.
There's a lot of people tuning in, nodding their head right now. They've been through it. They've been through
Absolutely.
that ring.
And I will tell you, as successful as I am, and I'm not sure if I should be saying this out loud, I will never pay off my student debt. I can afford to right now, but I'm hoping that bubble's going to burst at some point because I have this beautiful piece of paper that cost me $80,000, $90,000 that, a lot of my employees over here told me you don't really need a college education to be successful with what we do. And I don't ever want to dumb down the recruiting space, but monkeys can do what we do, right? As long as you can hold conversations, you can learn the technical aspect of it. And it's all about relationships, and that's why we're here, right? This is why David decided to invite me on here, was specifically because we have built a relationship over the past couple of years, and we reconnected out in Vegas a couple of months ago, and we're doing work together. That's all it's been.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I gotta give you a little bit more credit than monkeys can do it. Like the relationship building side of things is a huge thing. That's the personality side. Like there are some people that are just book smart, SAT smart, like amazing, wicked smart people, but they're not conversational or they don't know how to really lead people. So what you're doing is impressive. I mean, you're building teams, you're working with some of these elite level clients. So it's definitely more than a monkey just sitting in your chair being able to do it. But I know what you're saying where it's not necessarily this is like the oldest kind of lamest thing to say, but like it's not rocket science, right? I get what you're saying. But yeah, Dave, add to that.
No, I was going to say the same thing. I mean, it's a It's a tough business, right? At the end of the day, building relationships is not easy, as easy as you say it is, Chris, right? That's the secret sauce in any business, is building relationships. So I think you guys do a great job doing it. And I want to kind of sit there for a second let's talk about founding Leap Brands. I know your story, but love for everyone in the audience to hear your story. But what was your Chris, what was your initial vision behind Leap Brands? How did it evolve, since the inception, and kind of where it is today? If you want to start there, I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah, I think we have to go back a little bit further, right? And I really talk about my college career by any means, but I grew up in a lower to middle class family, 3 generations, 1 household, 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. I think at one point we had 11 of us living in there. And I was always told that money would set us free, right? As long as I made money, I'd ultimately be happy. I found now that that's not actually true. But that was always my goal, just make as much money as possible. How do I ultimately do that? And throughout my college career, pre-law, pre-med, and then ultimately ending on economics, thinking I'm going to work on Wall Street, I was always chasing the dollar. Throughout my 7 years of getting my undergrad degree, I had always had full-time jobs. And I will be the first one to say I faked it till I made it. I lied my ass off, right? I got my first general manager job at a retro fitness, having no experience. And that kind of got me into a leadership role pretty early on in my career. And I was fortunate enough to have a family friend that worked over at NBC Universal. It was a big time between the transformation of analog over to digital. Being the young guy, I was able to kind of comprehend a lot of where the industry was actually going. So I got promoted pretty quickly throughout my time with NBC. Had a chance to work on the Sochi, the London Olympics, NHL, MLB, English Premier League. I mean, anything except the NFL is the only thing I didn't touch, which still hurts me a little bit. But as a very young man, I made a lot of money in doing that in broadcasting, but I realized I was giving up my entire life for the dollar yet again. Still hadn't finished my degree. I was recently engaged to my wife, didn't really get to see her very often, nights, weekends, and holidays. So I had went to the president of NBC, who I became very close with over the time, and he had said, "What do you really want to do in your career?" And I didn't have an answer for him. He said, "Chris, leave here. You always have a spot at NBC. Go get some real life experiences." So my intention was always to go back to NBC at some point when I finished my degree. And I thought the best way to transition what I learned in the technical field was to learn the human capital side of it. So I was fortunate enough to land a job with an agency recruiting with an advanced technology search. I failed miserably. I think that I maybe got 1 placement during my 6-7 months I was with them. But that's where I started to learn the relationship side of the business. And I was actually trying to get Samsung as a client of mine. I failed at that, but they ultimately brought me on as an employee. So I worked with Samsung for a couple of years. And during that time working with Samsung, leading a recruiting team, which again, a position I was not qualified for, I kind of fell into it because my manager went on maternity leave. And off camera, we'll talk about some of the mistakes I made during that time working with a global company. My wife was working for H&R Block at the time. We got transferred out to Kansas City, and I had the opportunity to be a remote employee, which I will tell you, it was very, very difficult as a young man to find success and to rally my team around me when everyone was based in New Jersey. And I knew I needed to make a change. Living in Kansas City, coming from the East Coast, you have a very sexy background, right? There's a lot of diversity in Kansas City now, but 10, 12 years ago when we were there really was not. So it was very easy for me to find new jobs when I was out there. Got a lot of offers to work at a lot of local companies. And my wife was the one that told me, it's like, you don't want to work in corporate America. You don't realize it yet, but this is not where you're meant to be. I never realized what she was talking about until maybe many years later.
What does your wife do, or what did she do at the time to have that vision?
I couldn't tell you why she had that vision. I wish I could tell you, but
her parents and
absolutely not. We all come from no, we come from very blue collar families. I mean, her mother works for Ernst & Young, has been there for 30 years. But so she was working for H&R Block at the time. She was actually on the retail side initially before she got promoted over to corporate. And her job has changed so many times over the years. If you tell me what she did today, she actually just got a promotion about an hour ago. Again, I think it's her third promotion in the past year since being with this company. So I couldn't answer as to why she pushed me into it, but she was sending my resume out to a bunch of people on Indeed of all places. And she found this one entrepreneur out of Kansas City who had just purchased actually a recruiting agency, Global Recruiters Network. And he had joined that because his other business was failing at the time. And very quickly, his failing business turned into a very lucrative business that was taking off. So he had owned this recruiting business that he never really did anything with. And he wanted someone that can kind of take that thing over and build on it. So I applied for the role. I had one conversation with him, and I think I was hired maybe 2 to 3 days later. I'm like, listen, I'm the guy to take this thing to the next level. We'll figure out how we can all make money together. And his initial industry he focused on was restaurants because he owned an FF&E company that supported national and regionalized chains. And when we first got over there, it was specifically focused on unit level management, general managers, chefs, sous chefs, back of the house people. And, within the first month or so, I'm like, we're never going to make money doing this. This is not what we have to do. Where is the money in the industry? And what would stay within the restaurant industry, because clearly we have a brand here, right? So at the time, the company was called Leap Hospitality, which again was his FF&E company. Even though we were underneath the GRN umbrella as a franchisee, there wasn't a lot of value from a branding standpoint there. And again, I don't know if I just listened to a lot of podcasts, read a lot of books back then. I realized that it wasn't going to kind of push us forward. So I told him we need to work under the Leap Hospitality umbrella. We'll still pay our franchise fees. We'll do everything we need to do to stay in compliance with them, but we're not going to be part of that company or that system. So I kind of threw out the playbook, threw everything out, and rebuilt everything from scratch. And I realized, where's the money? It's with the executives. So failing for the first couple of weeks, reaching out to executives, doing what every recruiter does. Hey, I'm a recruiter. I want to work with you. Okay, that did not work at all. So how do I actually integrate into there? I started connecting with the private equity owners. And I realized after reading Jab, Jab, Right Hook by Gary Vee, you have to give, and then ask, right? We have to show our value first. And that's exactly what I did. And whether that was just showing talent to them, potential acquisition opportunities, which at the time I had no idea what acquisition actually meant. I just knew that if I could make something up, people would want to talk to me. And that was kind of the start of everything. It's been rolling ever since then. We've never paid for a dollar in marketing. All my business comes through referrals and my relationships, which has been awesome. But, throughout the 6 years I was with my now ex-partner, we had a lot of transitional times during that period, going from me as an individual contributor, where we both made a lot of money, to actually growing a business. And at this point, very small business. And, in 22, we got approached by private equity to sell the recruiting business as long as his FF&E business was attached to it. I never wanted to continue down that path of working my ass off to make a lot of money. I wanted to actually build a team that can help me make money at some point, right? So I had a first right of refusal in my partnership agreement. When we got the offer from private equity, I exercised that. We started going down the path of me buying out his 51% of the business. Ultimately, those negotiations kind of failed and fell through. We had just completed the big rent-a-center acquisition deal. It was a $72 million deal where we represented both sides. So we had a very nice fee coming our way. I remember it was Tuesday, March 7th, so the day after my wife's birthday. I got a call from my ex-partner saying, Chris, I'm shutting the business down, go and fire all the employees. And at the time, I think we had 3 or 4. So it was the biggest blessing in disguise, because now I no longer have to pay him for 51% of the business. I can just continue business as usual, right? With no non-solicitation, no non-compete. And that's how Leap Brands was born. I brought on my partner, Chaz Servino, who had, started a marketing agency out of college, grew it to about 75 employees. He had a successful exit maybe 3 years prior, was in corporate America, was hating what he was doing. And I convinced him to take the ride with me, starting from scratch. No one got paid for a couple of months. I put every dime I had into this business, and I told my wife that one day we'll get back to where we were financially, but just believe in me and I'll take this thing to the next level. And, here today we sit at, I think, 10 full-time employees. We have 7 or 8 interns this semester, to my knowledge. We've diversified our portfolios, not just within, obviously restaurants and franchising, but we're in healthcare now, agriculture, artificial intelligence. I mean, name it. We're almost generalists at this point, which is a good and a bad thing. So very long-windedly, I had success right out of the gate. I have built on it, but now I'm trying to learn how to be a CEO, right? I'm not just an individual contributor anymore. I need to train these kids to be the next version of me. And that's probably been the most challenging part.
So let's unpack that, Chris, a little bit. First off, that's a lot, and that's awesome, dude. And super proud of you, honestly. Kind of leads into where I wanted to go, which you kind of went to, is, every business has challenges. Every business has triumphs. You went through that over this course of 6-7 years that you kind of just described. But going through that, right? If I'm an entrepreneur going through that, I like to call them nuggets, right? Give me one nugget that you took out of that process, right? Whether it was, how do you acquire a business from an existing partner? How do you kind of manage that and build at the same time? You're going through a lot of emotions at that time, right? You're probably, I think you were moving back from KC back to Jersey, right? There's a lot going on, married, kids. Like, how do you, if I'm an entrepreneur, I'm sitting here, what's like one thing, like, hey, this is your one beacon, like stay focused on this. What would that be?
I think it's just being able to stay in your lane, right? So we tried to transition this business quite a few times over the years. And I realized when you look at the historical data of how our revenue was building over those years, whenever we took our eyes off the ball of what we were good at, right, we saw a pretty huge dip. So you don't need to be the master of a million different things in order to be successful. Just do what you're good at and keep building on top of it. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, people glorify the idea of being a business owner, right? It sucks. Like, it really does. It sucks, and it's awesome because you are the one driving the success of the business, not just for yourself, but also all your employees. So there is a lot of responsibilities there, and you don't realize that the sacrifices you have to make. And that's something I'm still trying to work out myself, right? Is like finding that fine line of working too much. But I think because we were working in a legacy business, there are a lot of owners out there that haven't understood how to transition in this new digital era, right? Like, how do you use technology in your favor, but not overdoing it? I think that's what we've been able to do over at least the past year, is implement a lot of systems that has really increased our workflow and our efficiencies, but it still hasn't lost the personal touch.
Yep. That's awesome.
Something you talked about, Chris, was you wanted to focus on executive, right? The executive recruitment side was a big part of the business that you saw. Hey, this is a level. It was hard to get into at first because you were kind of blending in with the noise. A lot of people are hitting up executives to try to help them out with recruiting. So you did the jab, 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 right hook approach, right? So you got in there with executive recruitment. Can you give us some of the qualities when you and your team are looking for someone on that level? What are you looking for? And like, how do you pair them with a company? How do you decide, what that looks like? Can you share the process with us?
I'll do the best that I possibly can because it's very specific based upon the client, the company, and the brand, right? So there's not a one size fits all by any means. And I don't want to throw any of our certain brands out there, but we work with a lot of turnaround brands, right? So it's very hard to take someone that's at a very sexy brand and say, come over here, work here. You can be a part of this transition. Because most of the time, as David knows, it doesn't actually work, right? People always have this hype of, we can turn this brand around. It can be relevant again. And usually it doesn't work. So you just have to find people that have the right background in terms of when they do get to a point of a roadblock, can they power through it, whether they are a lower level manager or if they're an executive. So I think it's finding the right mindset of people that understand that in order to see success, you have to put the time into it, not jump ship too early. So I guess when you're looking at the actual experiences of a lot of these guys, it's more about their tenure, and things have changed so much over the past, let's call it 10, 15, 20 years, right? My parents' generation, you stay with one company your entire career. That's almost frowned upon now, right? Because now you're not diversified. You don't have experiences in other brands, other concepts, other functions.
Like, what are you missing out on? You've been at the same place for 10 years now.
Exactly. So something that used to be celebrated many years ago is no longer celebrated. Like, if you're at a company for longer than, let's call it 5 years, and you don't have a huge trajectory in your career change over there, you're doing something wrong, which is not always the best way to look at it. So I think it's us being able to evaluate why that person has been somewhere, maybe why they've changed so many times. And that's where recruiters fall really short, is they only look at the LinkedIn profiles, only the resumes. They don't get the better chance to understand the person. And that's what we try to do, is understand their individual circumstances, what life events has happened to driven them where they are.
So earlier you mentioned monkeys. Pretend now I am the monkey. All right. Okay. I'm trying to figure out, put this in my head on what you're actually doing. You're sourcing, like, you got these companies that need executives and you're going out and finding them. That's the recruiting process, obviously. But are there also people that are executives? Maybe it's like someone that's a 1099. They're going to come in and be like a CFO or something, right? And they're, what's the term? Functional CFO? Is that the right term for it? Fractional. Thank you. Functional, fractional, whatever, same thing. No, so fractional CFO. That's an example, right? So are those guys and gals coming to you saying, hey, I'm out here, can you partner me with someone, or are you doing all of the recruiting yourself?
Yeah, so I would say it's actually probably more of that, to be honest, right? So that the talent pool is always very robust. So we have more candidates than we do positions to fill. And I think when you think about the value that we have with a lot of our client partners is, yes, we have these open recs that we'll work on, some confidential, some not. And we do everything from entry level now up to the C-suite across all different functions, which has been really cool for us to kind of touch that, because when you place someone in an entry level role, you have no idea where they're going to be in 5 years from now, right? They can be that key decision maker, which is a value I'm trying to teach a lot of my employees is just because they are lower level, the fees are going to be substantially lower. You have to nurture those relationships because I have proof in the pudding of 6-7 years ago where I placed this guy. And now he is a CFO or a CEO somewhere, and now he's calling me. But when you think about a lot of the talent pool that's out there that's looking for jobs, there's usually a reason as to why. Most of our clients want the passive candidates, the ones that don't have a reason to leave their job. And that's where we come in as the experts in recruiting is, can we sell them on the vision and the opportunity of what this company is trying to do to pull them away from that stable position that they're in? Maybe they're leaving equity behind to take, let's say, the leap of faith, right?
Yeah.
For sure.
Absolutely.
So Chris, let me just one follow up on that, and then I'll go on to my next question. Do you, and I think I know the answer to this, but do you find it better if a candidate is at a current role or someone who's already left saying, you know what, I couldn't take anymore, I'm out, and then, hey, I want to find my next role? Which one kind of works best, I guess?
I mean, it's always nicer when they're unemployed because then they can start immediately, right? But again, the way that our clients will view it for the most part is they want someone that is still gainfully employed because it means that they're valuable. There's a reason why they're still employed. Whether, a lot of candidates, individuals, when they leave a job, it's a red mark on their resume regardless, right? Either they couldn't cut it or they made a bad decision by joining that company. So at least if they're still employed, even if they're hating what they're doing, they're still showing a track record that they're sticking it out. And I think that's where a lot of candidates really fall short during the interview process. If they are employed, they'll give all the negatives as to why they want to leave their current position. It's the worst thing you can possibly do. Even if they're all true, you have to find a little bit of the positivity there or find a way to spin it. And that's where a lot of our candidates fall short is they will, am I allowed to curse on here? Bitch and moan? They will get, okay.
Go for it.
Yeah, so they'll just bitch and moan about all of the opportunities they were passed up on for, why they haven't gotten promotions, the fact they have to travel too much, they're working too much. These are things that companies don't want to hear about. They know these things exist out there, but sometimes you just got to be silent.
Chris, it's like going on a date and all your date is doing the whole time is complaining about their last relationship. You're like, okay.
That's exactly right.
These are all these negative things about a relationship, and then you're like, but you want to start and get into a relationship. Very jaded feel to it. Doesn't exactly excite the next possible relationship, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely.
So Chris, let's move forward, right? So in terms of now, let's look at future trends, right? So what do you see the next 5-10 years? What's the trend that you predict that will dominate the recruiting, space, the human capital space in the next 5 years? Any trends you're seeing?
I mean, I think the whole AI trend is starting to fall short. People have always said that the artificial intelligence is going to change the way recruiters do their jobs, sales, marketing, and there's a lot of truth to it, but it's not going to replace the human capital side of it. And I think that's the one thing we've learned is if we find a way to embrace technology, it's only going to make us better, right? But I think it's still such in its infancy right now. It's hard to say where we're going to be in 5 to 10 years. I do know that with everything, especially with going on in the election and the current economy, that I think we're going to start seeing a lot of hiring freezes as we approach the election date. And when you look at the recruiting industry as a whole right now, there are mass layoffs going on with the big boys, right? The Korn Ferries of the world, and even some of the smaller agencies are starting to fail. We have seen an upward trajectory, and we're continuing to grow, and we ever have since 2016. And I couldn't tell you exactly why we're ultimately being successful, but I do know our big differentiating factor is we have a personality. You see some of the content we put out there. I'll tell you, some of it's been absolute trash. We're starting to level it up. We've brought some new photography people on over here. So you're going to see our content from a long form and a short form content really take a huge step up. But people, when they're seeing the content that we're putting out there, they're seeing us as people, right? Every other recruiter out there, I'm sure you've all been approached by them at some point in your life, is they all say the same thing. They have this greatest opportunity in the world for you. They give you this long spiel. You probably stop reading after the first sentence. We take a very different approach on it. We want to get to know you as a person before we ever talk about business. And when you're able to show your vulnerabilities as a recruiter, your wins and your losses, because you'll see us put out on LinkedIn. I think I have a Leonardo DiCaprio meme of us crying because we lose positions all the time. I hate to say it, but it's truth. We don't want to just share the wins. You start to see what we actually go through on a daily basis, and you realize that every person in here, although we have a lot of fun, we probably work more than most people. And what I want to make sure that we do with every employee I bring in here is you're going to work a lot, you're going to make a really good living, but you have to find what we call work-life harmony. Work-life balance doesn't exist anymore. I don't care what industry you're in or what level, the expectations are super, super high. So can you find a way to kind of marry those two together? And I haven't figured it out yet. I'm trying to, so it's hard to be the example with my employees. But when every one of them are trying to meet me at where I am and working as much as of course, the owner, it's very difficult because burnout is real, and not just in a sales environment. It can be anywhere.
Chris, what advice would you give to, there's a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs tuning in. We got a lot of people tuning in from all walks of their entrepreneurial journey, but let's say someone is looking to formulate their first business, or they're looking to get into the recruiting space and industry, and that's the business, maybe similar to what you were doing, a dozen years ago when you were getting the idea for Leap Brands. What's some advice you'd give them? Like, if you're starting in this business today, what are some framework, like you're laying down the train tracks, what would you do first?
And we're talking about specifically for recruiting, Mike?
Yeah, for your industry. Yeah.
I guess the very first thing is you just have to go for it, and you have to commit 100%. You can't be successful, especially in recruiting or any sales environment, by doing it half-assed. It can't be a side gig. And unfortunately, I kind of proved that a couple of years ago. So we had started a licensing company off of Leap before Leap Brands, and we had maybe 7 or 8 licensees who, at my point, it was, how can I save on G&A from full-time employees and leverage my network out there to work for me? Everyone made money. It was fantastic, but no one could really achieve what they wanted to because they had full-time jobs. So you have to commit 100% is the very first thing. You can't be overly analytical. A lot of times in these environments, especially within business development, you're going to make this giant list of potential clients and contacts, and everyone's doing the same exact thing, and you're trying to make sure you're making the perfect pitch. It doesn't always work like that. And I think why I had been so successful is because I had a lot of vulnerabilities, and maybe I talked about things I didn't necessarily have a lot of expertise in, but finding mentors in private equity is kind of what set me apart. So finding a mentor in the industry that you're trying to grow in, not specifically in recruiting, but if you have your niche of you're going to get into restaurants, find a couple of those restaurant guys, let them coach you, tell you where some of their pain points are, and start attacking it that way.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah, I love that. Man. Mentorship is definitely, it's huge.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And we got a restaurant guy on the show right here with Dave Ragosa. We're in the franchising of restaurants. Dave, I got a question, man. We talk about productivity a lot on this show, being in that focused state, getting a lot done in a day. Did you get your shipment of Magic Mind yet?
I did not yet.
It's
I didn't order it yet. It's on the way.
Chris, have you ever tried this stuff, Magic Mind?
I haven't, but I was just going to say I haven't gotten it either. So maybe that means you're going to ship me a bottle at some point.
Yeah. Well, hey, let me know, because we actually, this is one of our sponsors right here, Magic Mind. I've been drinking this stuff now, I think probably 3 months. Ever since I started drinking it, no longer drink coffee, which anyone in my friends and family won't believe me. You got to live with me for a week to see. I'm not drinking coffee anymore, people. This is tea. This is green tea. But ever since I started taking Magic Mind, I get in this flow state. I drink it first thing in the morning, and then just for the next few hours, even more than coffee would kind of get you in that zone. It doesn't give you the jitters. You just get way more done. It's like I always talk about sports on the show for analogies. It's like being the quarterback and everything starts to slow down for you at the end of the game. I know you're hanging out with DeVito in Jersey a little bit later today, so you appreciate a good football game. But playing quarterback in the NFL, like everything slows down for the greats, right? In those moments when people get jittery and they start freaking out. So I definitely recommend this. And anyone who's tuning in right now, our mic'd up audience, I can get you 20% off. Use my promo code MICEDUP20. It's in the show notes. It's in the description on YouTube. So all you got to type in is MICEDUP20. Use the link that's in there. With Magic Mind, you can do more and stress less. And Dave, once you get your shipment, let me know. We'll talk about it.
For sure.
But
definitely
Chris,
will.
if you want to try it out, I can probably get you, I can definitely hook you up. And if you like it, I can get you connect you with their team. But, it's like I don't talk about companies, brands, things I don't use on the show. If there's ever a widget, an app, a product that I like, I mean, I actually reach out many times to their team and be like, I want to get you on our show, so.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny because, again, we preach health and wellness in our office, right? So we have an initiative going on right now. So as long as our employees go to the gym, work out, whatever it is, as long as they're moving around 4 or 5 times a week, they actually get paid for doing that. But the one thing we have not been able to kick is the energy drinks and the espressos in the office. We've tried to move away from it. Again, I think we all need it a little bit, so I will gladly try it. And if we can start utilizing that, it seems like it's a nice transition to get into it. So
yeah, let me know. Like the thing with me is it was like gut health. I had to really reevaluate everything I was putting in my system because I was working with a dietitian and we had to strip everything away. So I had to get rid of coffee for what was the thing they call? Help me out, guys. Like when you're doing a diet plan and you have to
like a cleanse?
Elimination diet. You have to eliminate everything and gradually bring it back in to figure out what's causing my gut issues. So I had to take coffee out, and I was, reintroduced onto green tea and stuff like that. But then it was right during the time when I was testing out Magic Mind. So I'm like, let me just, before I bring coffee back in the mix, let me go on this stuff. And I didn't like have the caffeine withdrawals or anything. And again, it's not, what it has in it, going back to it real quick, is adaptogens, vitamins, matcha, and nootropics. So that's how it's getting it done. It's not like I don't want to name names, but like we know those huge cans, right?
yeah.
That, you drink 2-3 of those a day and you're probably going to end up in the hospital in like a year. So we're not talking about that. I don't even like to call it an energy drink because a lot of times people think it's loaded with sugar and all kinds of 5,000% of this vitamin. It's like, holy, you don't need 5,000% of a vitamin. You just need to get
Let's call it an energy booster. Maybe that sounds a little bit better.
They call
sounds
it
more natural.
Productivity shot is what's written on the bottle. So we'll go with that. But yeah.
All right. Awesome. Productivity shot. I like it.
Dave, you had a couple of questions about balancing roles for Chris.
Yeah. So Chris, you were talking about it just a few minutes ago about balancing and there's no true balance, right? When you're trying to build a company, as you know, but if you look at your executive, you as a CEO or recruiting officer, how do you balance those various roles and responsibilities at Leap Brand? So how do you flip from I have my CEO hat on, I have my recruiter hat on, and at some point of the day, you're having, dad and husband hat on. Again, I agree with you. There is no balance. I think, you're in seasons and certain seasons require X amount of time for each of those roles. I want to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think it's fairly easy for me because I'm kind of on this flat plane, right? I'm always the same person, regardless whether I have my dad hat on, my CEO hat on, or my recruiting hat on. And like you mentioned, especially in the recruiting industry, things are changing every single second, right? So I could be working on this role today, something else an hour later. The only time I think I really make changes is when I'm around my children. I have realized pretty quickly after I've living in Kansas City for 6 years that I was extremely hyper. I have ADHD, right? I always need to be doing something. And my wife will be the first one to tell you I have a problem, right? I go into the shower, and if I'm not on a call with my partner, I'm usually watching a movie in the shower, listening to music. I always need to have something going on. But I think when you think about the balance side of it and kind of how I manage it, it's my calendar. It's something that I've always utilized. And if I use it a lot more and you had mentioned it working in flow states, when I start breaking away from my calendar is when things start to deteriorate, right? So I try to do my best that if I'm in a recruiting flow state, I am sourcing, I am working just on LinkedIn or going through emails, that's what I'm doing. My door is locked, people are not interrupting me. If I'm trying to coach my employees, it's the same thing. My phone is turned down. You have to kind of push out the outside noise. It's been the biggest challenge for me because, again, I am an individual contributor in my own business. I am, quote unquote, the most successful based on how many positions I place and the billings I bring in. But I'm trying to make that shift and start delegating a lot more of my work. And personally, it's been trying to find the right mentor to help me out with that. So I've actually been personally interviewing a lot of business coaches to figure out who's going to help me transition completely out of this individual contributor recruiting role. And can the business still be sustainable in order to do that? So yeah, it's the calendar. It's a very basic thing. If you follow your calendar and you stick to it, which was always one of the hardest things for me, if you can do that, like that's where you can find success.
I have a quick follow-up for that, Dave, have you ever taken like a stopwatch and timed yourself to see? I have a buddy who's crazy. He's also an entrepreneur, and he's a really smart guy, but he'll literally you could tell him what to do today, and he can tell you every 15-minute block. And it's super smart because I know a lot of times I'm like, oh, this is going to take me an hour. And then 4 hours later, I'm like, I'm still doing this in my calendar, So have you ever tried that? I'm just kind of curious of how you stay on top of your calendar.
I haven't, but honestly, people have recommended I do that. I probably should start. And again, when you look at my day, the only things I can tell you for a definitive, what's the word I'm searching for, David? I'm losing it now. Whatever. I can tell you every single day what I'm doing, right? After the kids go to school, I go to the gym for an hour. Like that's me time. And that it's never changed. And then from 4:30 to about 8 o'clock, it's time with my family. I'm not going to say every once in a while, I'm not going to have calls in between there, things I have to do. But those are the only things in my schedule I do not change. I did it for too long.
I think the word is non-negotiable. Is that what you're looking for?
Non-negotiables. Thank you. Yeah. And I think when I learned that from successful entrepreneurs and understand that when you're working for 16, 18 hours a day, if you don't have these breakups in between, you're really not going to be as productive as you'd like to be. And I've noticed as I made that transition, I know this is my work time. I'm actually going in there and I'm intentional about my time in doing that. And I get way more done in that hours of block versus if I was just kind of going all over the place. So no stopwatch. I will try it. I will just say I use reminders on my calendar, right? I mean, the reminders are going off an hour before I need to do something, a half hour, 15 minutes. So I think I get to a point where I upset myself that if I don't stick to that calendar because those things were going off for such a long period of time.
I'm the same way. And one thing I was just going to add to is, I think it was about 2019. I was listening to Ed Milet's podcast, and he's all about time blocking, and that really resonated with me. And what he said was, as you know, dads, husbands, entrepreneurs, right? He actually says, hey, we do it, typically we do it wrong, where we're trying to book our business, our, entrepreneurial things we got to do for the day. And then it's, all right, where can I squeeze in husband and wife time, dad time? He goes, do the opposite. He goes, plug in your kids' events, your wife events, right? Whatever it is, your family time events, put them in your calendar. And then from there, build out the rest of your day. This way there is time for your wife. There's time for your kids. You don't feel guilty. There's time for yourself, to your point, Chris, going to the gym. And then you plug in the other stuff because we're entrepreneurs, we're business owners. We're going to figure it out, right? We know there's enough time in this day. There's some, and I'm very similar to you guys. I like to stay busy. I hate sitting on the couch. My wife says Sunday, I try to turn it off on Sundays, and by 12 o'clock on Sunday, my wife's like, just go do something. Cause I know I'm too antsy. I can't sit there. But once I started building out my calendar that way and really putting in family time first, and then all the other things you had to do, I became more productive that way. So I agree wholeheartedly on that approach.
Absolutely. And you had mentioned the time about blocking family time, right? Because I talked about my kids, but what I didn't talk about was the time with my wife, right? I started dating my wife again about a year ago, where we have date night every Friday night. So Friday night is our time together. We have a special meal, which I'll tell you, for about 8-9 months, I would make what we call fancy grilled cheeses. I buy very expensive cheeses, put on sourdough bread. After 8 months of it, we finally need a break from it. And now our big thing is Five Guys. So I'm not trying to promote anyone out there. Five Guys food is terrible for you, but her father, who passed away about 2 years ago, it was his thing. And her and I had not had Five Guys for I think our entirety of our relationship. So that's kind of been our new thing together. But I've realized how great our relationship has grown, that we just have even just 2 hours a week actually together. Because we see each other throughout the week, but we're usually in the basement. We're both working. We both have our computers on. We have some TV series that we're listening to, but we're not actually spending intentional time together. And since we've made that shift, it's been unbelievable. It's been unbelievable.
That's awesome. Agreed. So let's just stay a little bit on this in terms of, time blocking. Now I want to talk a little bit about personal development, and with that, how do you continue to grow, develop as a personal, from a personal perspective, from a professional perspective? Is there any specific habits? We talked about obviously the time blocking in your calendar, but is there any specific habits that you practice that you want to share?
Yeah, and it's a very basic one. It's just reading, right? I'll tell you, I didn't grow up love reading books. I absolutely despised it, but I taught myself to very much enjoy it. And, I think we really developed this when I was at Samsung. So we were required to be able to do 20 to 40 hours, I think, a month on lynda.com. And you had to learn about something outside of what your job function was. So human capital, HR, and recruiting, I was not allowed to learn about. So I started getting pretty heavily involved into software engineering, network engineering. It was a different language to me, but I started to notice as I left college, I got dumb, right? Because of what I was doing. When you're doing the same thing, it's repetitive every single day, you're not being challenged enough. So it's something I actually have my employees do now. We actually have a required book club reading every month.
That's cool.
And it sometimes can be something. Like Oprah, yeah. I mean, I think a little better than the stuff that she's reading. But
For sure.
a lot of my guys are young over here, right? They just got out of college. So the last thing they want to do is pick up a book and read. But you realize that when you're not challenging your brain, you're not learning, you're not going to continue to grow. So I don't care what it is you're going to read about. You just have to keep expanding that mind. And reading has probably been the one thing that separated me from early on Chris Wunder of just grinding and doing and kind of running in place to now I can have very high level conversations with different executives in different industries because I randomly read a book about real estate tax strategies or artificial intelligence. And, I learned that after 7 years of college, I didn't retain anything that I learned in there. And it's sad to say because, being an economics major, I probably should know a lot more about what's going on out in the world right now. But being able to actually be selective on what I want to learn about on a monthly and an annual basis has kind of separated me to not just grow in the recruiting space, but also my other business ventures that I have.
I think that's the way, it's not even the future is going, but that's how the now is going. Like, you're talking about reading a book, right? If you're interested in a topic, if you're interested in the content, that's a huge word now, content, whether it's social media content or reading a book, if you're interested in it, you'll do it. You'll finish it. You'll read a chapter a day. You'll be hooked on it. I remember, like, personally, I hated reading growing up. I was always pulled out of regular classes to go into these reading classes. My reading comprehension, still today, I may have to read something twice or highlight it 3 times until I understand it. But, like, at the time, it seemed like a chore if you said to read a book because the stuff we were reading in school, I wasn't interested in. I remember there's this book, Hatchet, or like, even like the Shakespeare stuff, like you could kind of appreciate it, but I don't want to read it. I don't want to read Romeo and Juliet. I'm not interested in that really. But like, I remember my first book that I read cover to cover was Anthony Kiedis from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. His autobiography is like incredible. It's like, you can't put the thing down, the stuff he's been through in life. And so I was interested in it. I read that book cover to cover in like a week or two. And a light bulb went off. This was when I was like maybe 18 years old. I was like, I never read a book. I read this book. What the heck's the difference? It was the thickest book I probably owned. And the difference I realized was that I actually cared about it. So then once I got into business, just like you said, Chris, find books and find things that are interesting to you. It's so much that you can download into your brain, into your soul, that's going to project on you so you can go forward. And you're talking about the education system in school. 6 years of school, you feel like you lost all that because they were teaching you rote to learn it for the exam. And you're like, hey, I got an A, B in this class. I'm out of here, right? But when you learn something in life that actually like resonates with you, that goes far. So I think the way that schools are now is like, even I'm talking about grade school, let kids pick what they're really interested in. Does everyone have to learn about a whole week of like, something in biology that they don't care about? If someone wants to learn how to grow a business and they're 10 years old, get them going with it,
For
Absolutely.
sure.
And it was 7 years, Mike. Thanks for saying 6.
7 years.
I felt a little better about that. But I mean, yeah, and I don't think this is the topic of the conversation, but again, I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old now, and I'm looking at what their future is going to look like and how I can shape them, right? Because I didn't have a mentor growing up. I didn't have a father figure. I want to make sure that I give my kids all the tools that they need in order to be successful. And, I think growing up on the damn near poverty line like we had done, right, it was all about making money. And now that my kids live I don't want to say a life of luxury because I don't want them to ever know that we have money. I want them to be grateful for everything that they do have. But I want them to be able to chase something, in their early adulthood to do something they really want to do. And I think that's just going to be a piece that most people are going to lose because everyone wants to be rich and famous. They want to be content creators. And there's just too many of those guys out there that you have to find kind of what that niche is going to be. And I think a lot of people don't understand that the biggest value and the biggest gap we're going to have with these younger generations are these blue collar jobs. No one's going to want to do those, right? So you're going to start to see that the electricians and the plumbers out there are going to start making way more than doctors, and they're going to have no student debt. So it's crazy to think about what our kids are going to go through one day.
I think those guys should get paid anyways. I mean, they're the ones out there laboring. A lot of the guys in the construction field, by the time they're 42 years old, can barely walk in a straight line because their bodies are shot. They definitely should be getting paid. Talking about getting paid, I want to know more. Give me the scoop on $1 Million Recruiter. What's the scoop on that? And what do you see? Where's that going?
Yeah, so I hate to say it is something that we haven't put a lot of time or effort into as of late. We're going to probably start revamping it here in the next couple of months, but I think like everyone during COVID, it's like, how can you make a quick buck? And it was a e-course, right? So when I first started the $1 Million Recruiter, it was actually building off of a book I was writing. I don't know why in the right mind I thought that I deserved to write a book. I maybe had gotten maybe a chapter in and realized, okay, I'm pretty bad at this. But I can communicate, I can talk about how to be a successful recruiter and how to build a business. So we started building that e-course. And unfortunately, after the first couple of months of it actually going live and having a handful of sales, we made some money off of it, which was really cool. We didn't put any marketing dollars behind it, so it was really hard to actually go out and sell it. We actually started utilizing that as our training platform for our licensees and now all of our new employees. So the $1 Million Recruiter, unfortunately, is on the shelf right now. I might get the logo up there somewhere, so we don't use as much as we should, but we will be bringing it back.
You can plug it in again whenever you want. It's like that sign. You just
absolutely
plug it in and it goes again. Yeah, that's what's cool about creating different things and having different balls in the air. It's like you can decide when you want to juggle everything, when you want to put back into it. You don't have to shelf it and like mean that it's never going to see the light of day again.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I've had a lot of failed ventures, a lot of them, which I'll tell you, during COVID, I was developing a new protein pancake. I was super excited about it. And I was out there testing it every day, maybe an hour a day. I'm like, I finally got the recipe down. And I remember going to a Target, was maybe like a week or two later, and Kodak, the brand out there, started launching all their new flavors. And they were all the ones I was coming up with. So I'm like, all right, well, that one's lost on me. So I've had a lot of things I have tried and failed miserably. But recruiting and real estate are probably the two that have always been constant and consistent. And those are the two areas I think we'll always continue to grow into.
Yeah, that's awesome. Strength for sure. Let's look
back
and look forward, Dave. Yeah.
Let's do it. Looking back and looking forward, Chris. So like reflecting on your career, what are you most proud of? And, what are your future goals, for Leap Brand and yourself, in the next 3 years? So what are you most proud of, so far? And then next 3 years, right? What are your future goals for Leap Brand? Where do you guys see the brand going?
Yeah. So most proud of is that the business is finally outgrowing Chris Wunder, right? People aren't just saying they need to work with Chris, but it's Leap Brands. And I have hiring managers and executives that reach out to me and say, I need to talk to Nick. I need to talk to Dom. Like, that's really cool that I have employees that have been with me for a short amount of time and they're already making noise here. So I will always measure my success based upon the success of my employees. That's my goal in life. I know that I will always make money. Money will always come to me as long as I put the work into it. But if I could take these young individuals and give them something that they probably think that they never could have had, that's how I'm going to measure my success. Looking forward, we're growing in a lot of different areas right now, right? So we're a continuously recruiting agency firm. We do retain search every once in a while, which that's probably a longer conversation for the next time we get a chance to reason as to why we go down that path. But we started a couple of new arms to the business, right? We got into recruitment marketing. We're actually beta testing it with Ruby Tuesday right now. So we're actually going to be doing all of their hourly staff, something I never thought we would ever touch. It's hard enough to find salaried employees to take jobs, let alone hourly ones. So my partner Chaz is kind of leading that initiative. We have a SaaS play that we started about a year ago. We've had a developer building out a new platform that has really leveled up our recruiters. We still have a lot of beta testing that we have to do that will take that to market maybe in 24 months. But I think the ultimate goal of any business owners is a transaction, right? Like, I want to get to a sale, and having done this now for 7-8 years, that timeline's starting to shorten a little bit, but I think I have to realize that every year we've taken steps up. We've grown every single year. It's okay if we're not a $20 million company next year. Like, yeah, we have to crawl before we can walk. And with a lot of these young kids here, I have to level out before we can make that happen. So a transaction will happen in the future. Doesn't mean I'm exiting. I will do this till the day I die. I love this way too much. I will always do the recruiting portion. Like, that's what fuels my fire. But ultimately, we'll take on a private equity partner at some point. We've had offers. We have a pretty good acquisition roll-up strategy, which, again, I'm not going to give away too much of that right now. But we can see this business being 100 to 200 employees inside the next 5 years.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Hey, what we're going to do real quick is give some love to our other sponsors, Social Chameleon, Navigator Bookkeeping. So we're going to give them some love, and we'll be right back. Podcasting is a great way to engage with your audience and stay consistently relevant. The only problem is you don't have the time or desire to produce your own show. You simply want it done for you, and that's where Social Chameleon comes in. All you need to do is press record and upload the files. we'll handle the rest. From planning, production, post-production, distribution, and digital marketing, we have you covered. We realize that times are tough and funds are tight, and Social Chameleon believes in building supportive business relationships. By clicking on the link in this promo, we'll provide you 7 free podcasting tips to get started, as well as a free 30-minute online consultation. This is the perfect opportunity for entrepreneurs, keynote speakers, industry experts, influencers, and anybody who has a personal brand. With Social Chameleon, we help you build a brand that is out of this world. We're ready and waiting, so what are you waiting for? Click on the link to get started today. Hey guys, it's Mike. I'd like to give a proper shout out to Navigator Bookkeeping. Look, for a long time, I ran my business without really understanding the full financial picture. I used my gut and my bank account balance to make decisions, which led to some poor choices and constant stress over my business's finances. I knew something needed to change. At the beginning of 2021, I made a decision that helped pave a more clear path for my business. I started working with Navigator Bookkeeping. Since then, my bookkeeping has been handled for me. I now understand the full financial story of my business, making important financial decisions much easier now, and it helps me plan for where my business is going. I highly recommend giving Navigator Bookkeeping an opportunity to help your business. Check them out at navigatingyourbooks.com. Again, that's navigatingyourbooks.com. It's time to know the full financial story of your business. All right, we're back in action with Chris Wunder. And just remember, you guys can connect with him on social media, his websites. I got everything clickable in the show notes. You don't have to worry about spelling his name. He's got the funky spelling with the U in there. Don't worry about it. It's in there. By the way, Chris, you got the coolest name, I think, out of over 220 guests.
100%.
100%. No, there's no second place, I don't think. It's Chris Wunder. That's the coolest freaking name I've ever heard. So, but yeah, let's, people can tune in with you on social media. Is there any other place or something that you wanted people to check out right now?
I mean, obviously right now, I'll tell you, I don't have the biggest social media following. It's starting to grow, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, check out Leap Brands on Instagram. I think we got banned on TikTok last week. I don't know did you guys see the money drop we did last week?
No.
I did.
All right, so I'll just unravel that for you real quick. So we had a client that referred us a new business partner where we made a considerable fee on it. So we had paid a referral fee. We didn't have anything in writing, but I wanted to bless him with some money, right? So we thought the best thing to do was to take out $6,000 in singles and deliver it to him in a duffel bag without him knowing, showing up. And we did that. We did that live on TikTok, and for some reason we got banned. We'll figure out exactly the reason as to why. But
I always thought it took a lot on TikTok to get banned. I know Instagram, Facebook, they don't even explain why. But like TikTok, I felt like you had a longer threshold. But who knows? Something there. It's interesting. Hopefully, you get your account back, and by the time this airs, you'll be back in action on that. But I want you guys to talk a little bit about. There's this cool event, the Autism Golf Outing. Why don't you give that a little shout out?
Yeah, so I know the CEO of Rita's Italian Ice and Creamery fairly well, Linda Chadwick. I've known her now for the better part of 6-7 years. I've tried to place her many times with a lot of my clients over the years. It's never been the right time, unfortunately, and they're based right out of Philadelphia. The company has grown pretty considerably, and they're actually doing their first collaboration with the Philadelphia Eagles, which is very hard for me to accept them, and now sponsoring a golf outing brought on by the Eagles. But again, it's for a great cause, so it's benefiting the Eagles Autism Foundation. It's a foundation that's near and dear to some of our employees' hearts. It's an area that we want to make sure at Leap Brands that we give back. That's a very big thing for us. It's not just with autism, right? Like we have a lot of initiatives that we're building on as of right now. But yeah, it's on June 17th. I know there'll be a couple of Eagles players there. I think we have 8 or 9 of our employees that are going. Probably will not be the best experience from a scoring standpoint because we only have one player here that is probably shooting, low double digits in terms of a handicap. But yeah, it's going to be a really great time.
Yeah, that's awesome. And everybody wins when you're doing great things like that. I know you guys are Giants fans. I'm a Bills fan being in Buffalo, but Philly fans, I can root a little bit for the Eagles because my daughter lives outside of Philly. But when you're doing stuff off season together, it's like, everybody's winning right now. It's all good. Yep. Once Absolutely. Week 1 rolls around, nope, game over.
That's it.
Listen, I don't want to give the organization any shout outs more than they deserve, but what I will tell you, very, very quick story. So my cousin Jeffrey had open heart surgery the day he was born, and ultimately had quite a few throughout his lifetime. Heart failed. It was maybe 8-9 years ago, and he was in a coma for about 2 months leading up to Christmas. I'm like, I just want to make sure that if he does recover from this, he gets the heart transplant, he has something to wake up to. So I got involved with Make-A-Wish Foundation during that time, but I had reached out to the Philadelphia Eagles organization, again, even before Make-A-Wish. And within 3 days, I had a signed jersey from Darren Sproles, a handwritten letter from Chip Kelly, and then the owner sent a signed helmet. So, and the fact that they did that so quickly and made that happen, and Jeffrey is fine, by the way. Now he pulled through. He got a heart transplant, I think, a day before Christmas. It's one of those organizations that I grew up hating and despising, but secretly now I cheer for the Eagles just a little bit.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Cool. Dave, you got any last words or anything you want to say? And Chris also, any last things you want to add?
No, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, I know that I have the best name, so I already have something to rank on the podcast. I would love to continue to have conversations with you guys. Maybe I'll be invited back at some point, but
would love to have you back on.
Yeah,
for sure.
That would be awesome. Hopefully a little bit of a different story during that time.
Chris, I got one nugget though. I always I use my word nugget. There's always one nugget you get out of everything and every day and every experience.
Nugget.
So the golden nugget. If there was one nugget you can share with young entrepreneurs that want to start a business, whether it's recruiting or whatever business there is, right? What would be just that one nugget that they can utilize today, take action today, and hey, do this? What would you think what would that be?
It's just take the risk while you're young. It's the time that you can recover. It's very hard for entrepreneurs that are a little bit older in life when you have a lot of those responsibilities, wife, kids, house. Again, there's no wrong time to become an entrepreneur. You have to take that leap of faith, obviously, but don't let people talk you out of it. I will tell you, the closest people in my life told me that I would fail. They told me that I would not be successful. And now their story has changed a little bit. But even to this day, my mother, who has seen me be an entrepreneur and be very successful and get to where I am, every time I make a decision, she's still trying to talk me out of 95% of it. So you have to trust your gut a little bit, but trusting your gut is one thing. You actually have to put in the work. So know that you're going to sacrifice a lot. Even outside of entrepreneurship, just travel while you're young. It's the one thing I look back. I don't have many regrets in life, but I look back and I took 10, 15 years growing my career so much that I didn't get to see the world. And now I'm at a point where it's very difficult to do that. So if you're young and you have the ability to do it, you can always make money. You can always recover financially. Just do something that you can look back on and say that you lived a full life. Not everything is about work and making money.
Yeah, I champion that mindset for sure. I know Dave does too. That's awesome. And the other part of that too is like we all love our mom, we love our siblings, and they all do love us and mean well. But a lot of times when they're going to give us advice, it's from a loving, like, stability standpoint. Not that we understand they don't even know what you're doing 12 hours a day when you're running your business. So you said it earlier, mentorship. You're looking for a mentor. That's really the person. Hopefully they understand your field and your passion and your industry, where they can give you some great mentorship. But that's who you really would put more weight to, that side of it,
Yep.
But yeah, I think that's really, really, really well said. And we're grateful for you being on the show. We absolutely would love to have you on. You're already pre-invited back on the show. And I love to end every show with a couple things. You see the BG on my hat? That is be great and be grateful. And Dave and I are grateful for your time today. And I know the audience really picked up on some cool stuff in your story today. So thank you for being with us.
No, thank you guys for having me.
Chris.
I look forward to doing this again very soon, hopefully.